All right, so we're back here on another special edition of Couch Coach Live where we're continuing our Power 5 preview. So today we're going to be talking about the Big Ten. And we got now a official Off the Ball League, my fellow Off the Ball League colleague, Zach from the Blue Bloods podcast. What's going on, Zach?
Not much, man. But yeah, I mean, this is the first show we've done part of the Off the Ball Network, man. I'm excited to get it going. And, I think I speak for us all when I say I think we might have the best college football content out there right now in terms of a podcast network.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm definitely excited for you and Brandon to hop on. And once
Appreciate it,
again,
man.
like we said when we talked about it, I was like, look, front of the line, let's get our boys in. But yeah, and like you said, what we've done as far as the previews, the reviews, and just definitely looking forward to you guys' content going forward, and then also maybe down the line we can might cook something up, cook
Oh,
something
yeah.
up,
There's
you know.
always something cooking in the background that people don't know
Yeah,
about. Always.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So today we're gonna be talking about the Big Ten. So before we get started, definitely this week's Big Ten preview is powered by the good folks at mybookie.ag. Use our promo code off the ball where you can they match up your deposit up to $1,000. So definitely go and head on to mybookie.ag and win big. So there has been some news that surfaced last night, which was kind of interesting.
Yep.
That there is a possibility of the Big Ten and a potential allegiance with the ACC and the Pac-12. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I wanted to clarify some things up because I know there's some people who might be confused on what this alliance might be. But according to all reports, anyone within the know, this isn't a super conference. They're not combining into one. So, like, it's not going to be the big 30 or whatever you want to put it, how many teams. They're not combining the conferences. What they're doing is almost trying to form a group to go against the SEC because they felt the SEC's move to go grab Texas and Oklahoma from the Big 12. They deemed it as like aggressive, like the SEC was trying to monopolize college football. So this is their chess move to try to prevent that because they don't want the Clemsons, they don't want the Florida States, they don't want the Ohio States to join the SEC, and then we really don't even have an NCAA at that point. Couch Coach, we really just have the SEC College Football Conference, and that's all that matters. Because if you take the best teams from all the other conferences and throw them into the SEC, it's over. So what this alliance is that on big issues, they're going to vote together. They're going to make sure to schedule non-conference games together. They're going to do these things to, one, increase money, increase, I guess, TV revenue, increase visibility within the college football world. And what they're doing is trying to make sure they don't get overtaken by the SEC. And what this means is they're probably going to leave the Big 12 teams alone. Those last 8 teams, that means there's not going to be a huge fight on who gets Baylor, who gets TCU, who gets Kansas, who gets Kansas State. So what this really could do is be great news for the AAC in terms of they might be the only bidders, Coach. I mean, in terms of who gets those leftover teams. And so I'm interested to see where the AAC falls in this. But for the ACC, Pac-12, and Big Ten, it's great because what it does is protects your most valuable assets in terms of Ohio State, a Michigan, and Indiana, a Clemson, a Florida State, an Oregon, a USC, a UCLA, whoever you want to name. It protects their assets. And also, there's been this big talk. I don't know if you know this or any of the listeners. There's been a big debate on whether college football needs a commissioner to replace the NCAA. And me and Brandon did a huge episode on this. You can go check it out on our YouTube channel where we talked about what a commissioner could do. Because right now, it's really just a wild, wild west with the NIL, with conference expansion. I mean, if you had a question about it, who would you go to? The NCAA doesn't have any power right now because they don't even know what's going on with NIL. And then it's really just the conference commissioners just doing what they want, which is what we saw with the SEC grabbing Texas and Oklahoma. So if you have that central figure of power as a commissioner, you can can do and expand and do better for college football with a central figurehead where you got a commissioner and you have like a voting committee with all the conference commissioners surrounding him. And so I'm a huge fan of a college football commissioner, because if college football ever expects to fight off the AAF that's coming down the pipeline, the XFL, what it's done is now that we can pay players, this has become a semi-professional league. Whether you like it or not, that's what it is now that players are being paid. And we saw De'Aaron King sign an NIL deal with the NHL team. So you need a commissioner so we can get some rules, we can set some boundaries, so we can get deals set up to improve college football. Because what needs to happen is, if we don't have a commissioner, a lot of these players are going to just be out in the open, unprotected, and that's not what I want. I want the best ones for the player. And so we need a commissioner of college football to handle that, along with voting. And so I think this alliance is a big step forward. And what it's going to do is make sure the SEC cannot monopolize college football.
Yeah, and like we said, and it's funny because I remember when we talked about it last year, as far as the COVID protocols and what have you, how they all kind of want to be aligned, and those type of issues kind of exist. It's almost like saying similar to what could potentially happen down the line, like you said, the NIL, which, like you said, it's like we talked about this too, where this might become the Wild Wild West, where
it is right now.
It is, yeah.
Where are the guidelines? Who has the guidelines? Like, if right now, if I ask you, where can you go right now and look up what's allowed in NIL and what's not? I don't think anybody listening, either of us, have that answer. And so if you don't have a centralized figurehead, then how in the world do you set any rules and boundaries? And all the conferences are going to look out for themselves. So you need somebody who can bring everyone together and do what's best for college football, because there's issues coming down the pipeline. You got the expanded playoffs, you got new TV deals, you got the NIL, how does that affect recruiting? How do you affect conference expansion? And also, you have a lot of decisions that need to be made down the line, because coaches have suggested putting a bounty on a degree, which could affect who declares for the draft. So what Mike Leach suggested at Mississippi State, which I like the idea at a face value. I want to see some more details worked out, but say if you stay all 4 years and earn your degree, you get $200,000 in terms of money. And if you stay and get your master's, you get $500,000 because it's a graduate degree. So you incentivize these kids to get an education, which I think is a great idea in the first place. But I'd like to see some details worked out. But who works out those details? What's keeping the ACC from doing a completely different thing than the SEC on the other side? And what I see is a good commissioner makes a good league. You look at the NBA with Adam Silver is doing a way better job at being a commissioner than Roger Goodell in the NFL. So you want to, one, make sure you vote the right person into power, and two, vote someone who has the best idea, the best thoughts for college football moving into the future.
Yeah, I agree as well. Like you said, because you need to have a uniform front. And then now, as in a few, especially I want to say at least within the next 4 years, once the expansion of the college football playoff, because that's another thing where it's going to be infighting, and you're going to need somebody to kind of be that buffer, because and that's one thing too. We even talked about it on my show on Couch Coach Live, where we were like, because at that time we still thought there was going to be still Power 5 conferences, and one of the ideas was suggested, say, hey, well, SC can only allow 2 teams, and I'm like, that's not going to. I like, in a perfect world, great. Like in the perfect world, that would be a nice little mandate, but the SEC is not going to take that. No, the SEC can say, they can even say, even this year, hell, I could had 3 teams. I could have 3 teams that can make the college football playoff. So why should I have to sacrifice like a Texas A&M if like a team from the AAC makes it, and then from another Power 5 conference or what have you? So I mean, yeah, like you said, it's, especially as college football expands, is now and the money is definitely growing, especially when you look at SEC, who's going to be on the verge of $1 billion conference. Yeah, you have to. Yeah.
I mean, I want to see how their TV deal works out, because what happens now is they've already signed their next TV deal. CBS doesn't expire yet, but the SEC already has their next deal lined up with ESPN. So, you see that 2:30 game on CBS, that's done after that deal's over. That game's going to move to ESPN or ABC after that. What I want to see now is they've already negotiated it, but now you're bringing Texas and Oklahoma into the fray. Man, if you would have just held off, how much more money could you have gotten? And is the SEC going to leverage that for more money into the future? And then an issue, Couch Coach, that I don't think a lot of people are talking about are roster spots. The roster limit is so much, the scholarship limit is so much. Well, now with high school kids, we saw it with Quinn Ewers coming to Ohio State early. That took a roster spot away from somebody who thought they might have had one coming into the school year, and it's August 14th. So guess what? That kid
Yep.
has nowhere to play next year because it's the
Yeah.
deadline has passed. It was July 1st for a transfer. So now what does that kid do? So now what we need to do is decide, can that, so each year they're allowed to offer 25 new scholarships, Couch Coach, if in case people didn't know. How can that, so what I've proposed on our show is that needs to be more flexible. So it needs to be this flexibility based on one, how many players you had leaving early, two, how many graduating seniors do you have, and three, how many transfers do you have leaving and coming in to your program, because it's not fair. So let's take a Tennessee, for example, who lost their
Yeah.
head coach this year. They lost, I think it was 35 scholarship players off their roster last year, whether it be to the draft, transfer, everything. How is it fair that they only got 25 scholarships to replace that for their first year head coach, but then let's not take Alabama because they lost a lot of pieces too. Let's take like a Kansas State. Let's say they only lost like 15 players. How is that fair that you have to replace 35 players with a limited number of scholarships while this other school only has so many spots left open because their situation is different? And what I think is going to happen, Couch Coach, is you're going to see, this is what I think, this is just speculation. I think you're going to see another signing day added. And what I think is going to happen, so you'll have the signing day in February, you'll have the early signing day in December. I think you're going to add a third signing day called the late signing day that won't be till about May or June because of the transfer portal. Because if you
Yeah.
don't add it, what's going to happen is these kids are going to commit, and then the transfers are going to come in late. And a lot of these high school kids are going to be left without roster spots wanting to transfer. So I think you're going to see a lot of kids start to wait till those transfers are sorted out before they start committing to programs.
Yeah, and like you said, like that third one, yeah, because that could be pretty much your last shot of
Yep.
even getting into school. So, like you said, once the dust settles with the transfer portal and what have you, yeah, that could be potentially it. But yeah, so in the Big Ten, what do we got here? So, what is the game to watch? Games to watch.
Yeah, so this first one, I need to probably explain it because people are going to be like, man, why would you want to watch that game in a million years? And that's Penn State, Michigan. November 13th. And I know both programs, Penn State had an atrocious year last year, started 0-5. They rebounded to get to 500 with 5-5. And Michigan has been a dumpster fire ever since they decided to pay Harbaugh the Brinks truck. I don't know why you would back up the Brinks truck for a coach that has underperformed like that, but they have. This game's important because it's really going to determine who can turn their program around. Is Michigan, did they finally figure out their quarterback situation? Is Harbaugh finally going to be able to compete with the best of the best in the Big Ten? And or does James Franklin have a real problem on his hands last year? Was last year was it just an abnormal year and they had a weird year for Penn State? And or was it just, signs of things to come? And now I want to say Penn State will be fine. They have the number one recruiting class in 2022 right now in the country over Alabama, Ohio State, all that. That's pretty outstanding. But this game is really going to determine which the trajectory of these programs for next year. And that's why I think it's important. And then we talked about this game on our Pac-12 preview, man. It's Oregon, Ohio State. That game is so important for so many reasons because it's really a college football playoff type impact game. You got Oregon coming in, and this breaks my heart, man, because we should have seen Ohio State go to Autzen last year in Eugene, Oregon. What
Yeah.
talk about a trip right there in week 2, but instead Oregon heads to Columbus this year. This is interesting because is CJ Stroud going to be ready week 2? That's the question I think everyone has to ask themselves. And I know there's a lot of people saying, well, CJ Stroud's this type of recruit. Listen, you can tell me all the stars, you can tell me all the high school stats until
Exactly.
he suits up in a primetime game against a defense that's going to be top 10 in the nation like Oregon is, I don't want to hear it. We're going to find out what CJ Stroud's made of week 2. And also, with all the losses that Ohio State had on that back end, we're going to find out what Anthony Brown is at Oregon as well. Can he, exercise his demons from Boston College and become a more efficient passer? This game is a juggernaut battle. I hate Fox for putting this game at 11 a.m. If you're a primetime game and you're a primetime network like Fox, please stop putting your damn games at 11 a.m. Nobody wants to wake up at 10 o'clock and have to watch a game on Fox and for it to be a top 10 matchup potentially. That is ridiculous. Please stop doing that. I'm so ready for that TV deal to be worked out. But yeah, it's 11 a.m. in Columbus, so you better get up. And how unfair is that to Oregon? That's like 8 a.m. in Eugene.
Right.
So I'm hoping what I think Oregon will do is travel like 3 days earlier than they should. And that way they can adjust to the time zone difference. But 11 a.m. is ridiculous. But this game still, I'll be up. But yeah. I think there's a lot of people on the West Coast that are going to be pissed that they got to wake up at 7:30 to catch this game. And then the game that I think determines one division in the Big Ten is Ohio State, Indiana. It determined it last year, and we saw Michael Penix throw for 500 yards and 5 touchdowns and almost pull off the upset in Columbus. Michael Penix is back. Indiana dominated the transfer portal, man. They shored up the offense and defensive line. They got a 5-star running back in the portal. Ty Freifogel is back at wide receiver. This game's going to be so amazing to watch. Ohio State returns. They have the best wide receiving unit in the country. Let's just put it out there. You have so many NFL athletes. Ohio State's wide receiving unit this year rivals LSU's in 2019. That's how talented they are. When Marvin Harrison's son is probably your 5th best wide receiver, I think you did pretty good in recruiting. And Indiana, Ohio State, October 23rd is going to determine who probably represents that division in the Big Ten Championship. And then Minnesota, Wisconsin, I think, is a big game. November 27th is a big rivalry game. It's in the snow every year because it snows in Minnesota and Wisconsin all fall anyway. This game is going to probably determine the other representative in the Big Ten Championship. It determined it in 2019. Minnesota took a huge step back. They just lost a lot of talent. When you look at Antoine Winfield Jr., you look at Tyler Johnson, both of which are Super Bowl champions now for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It was a tough year last year. They returned one of the best running backs in the country in Muhammad Ibrahim. You return Tanner Morgan at quarterback, and Wisconsin has one of the most loaded rosters in the Big Ten. This game is always one to watch, man. And so these 4 games are probably the games to watch if you watch any games in the Big Ten this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. And yeah, that's crazy. I still can't get over the fact it's at 11 o'clock. Wow, that is.
Think about how great it would be at 7 p.m. in prime time under the lights with those great Oregon uniforms. Now you got to do it at 11 a.m. where it's probably going to be cloudy in Columbus, Ohio. Like, come on, man, it's terrible.
I know that is unreal, but yeah, the biggest game in this Pac-12 is going to be 11 o'clock in the morning.
Yep. How about that? Or really 8 a.m. if you're talking about
8 a.m. Yeah, their time. Right. Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's brutal. So players to watch in the Big Ten.
Oh man, I don't know if our guy I don't know if our Ohio State guys from off the ball are on here or not.
Yeah.
Don't like this pick. It's Chris Olave, man. The wide receiver for Ohio State. And if you're looking for the number 1 wide receiver in the draft next year, it's Olave. And it's Olave by such a significant margin, I don't even know who you would argue would be second. And he's going to be a future star, whatever team he winds up at. He's the number 1 candidate for the Biletnikoff Award, which goes to the best wide receiver. Listen, he has the route running. He has the explosiveness. He has the speed. He has the ball skills. I love, me, Couch Coach. I love advanced analytics. That's just what makes me. Brandon on our podcast is the heart guy. He'll give you the opinions. I'm all analytics here. Yeah. He generated in his 2 seasons as a starter, 2019 to 2020, he generated more than a step or more of separation on 90% of his targets, which means he had a DB beat on 90% of his catches by a step or more. That just doesn't that don't even sound real if you're really being honest. And 1,700 receiving yards, 22 touchdowns, and over 16 yards per catch in his career. He's the best downfield threat in the league. Last year, he ranked only behind Devontae Smith in catches that generated 15 or more yards. And in 15 of those catches, he had 2 or more steps of separation. I mean, he's just
Ooh.
burning dudes, and it's not even hard for him. And what makes him so good, and what I loved about Devontae Smith last year is he made it look easy. And when you watch Devontae Smith last year, when he was running routes and burning people, you're like, he doesn't look like he's doing anything. He doesn't look fast. It's just why can't they guard him? And that's what you get with Chris Olave. But I think he's more athletic than Devontae Smith, which is why he is so dangerous at the next level. And he has the size, has the speed, everything. I expect him to be on the ESPN top 10 plays almost every week next year. And if there's a wide receiver who can make a run for the Heisman, it's Chris Olave. CJ Stroud, say what you want about him. He's a freshman. We haven't seen him play. He has his number one target. If he's under pressure, if he's in danger, just throw it to Chris Olave, and he's probably going to get you a pass. And I got to give you a defensive guy, and I try to give you different schools, but I had to pick two guys from the same school for my last two because they're just that good. And the first one is Tywan Mullen, cornerback from Indiana. And if the last name sounds familiar, it's because he is the brother of Trayvon Mullen for the Raiders, that former Clemson, and he's cousins from Lamar Jackson, the Ravens quarterback.
Wow.
So talk about a football bloodline right there. And I think Mullen has the potential for you to hear his name on Thursday, which is first round of the 2022 NFL draft. He's that shutdown corner that can shut down a side of the field that teams love. He's long, and that length and physicality that he brings is just why he's one of the best players in the country. In 2 seasons, he's only allowed a 45% completion percentage against him. I mean, that doesn't even that doesn't even make any sense. And this stat is going to be crazy for you, Couch Coach.
Yeah.
In 94% of the games he's played in, he's allowed 40 or less yards, which leads to FBS by, you can only imagine how much that leads to FBS by. I mean, nobody's even over 90 last time I looked. So for him to do that is crazy. 15 pass breakups, only allowed 4 touchdowns in 2 seasons of playing. I think he's the key to this Indiana team really taking that next step. They lose their defensive coordinator, though. Kane Womack took the South Alabama head coaching job. So I'm very interested to see how Tom Allen revamps his defense and what that new defensive coordinator does over there in Indiana. Mullen's the key. The Hoosiers are really the only realistic threat in that division to Ohio State, and they're going to need this next player to step up too, which is Michael Penix Jr., the Indiana's quarterback. I couldn't come on your show, man, and do this kid a non-justice by mentioning him. He ranked the number 2 quarterback in the Big Ten last year, right behind Justin Fields, and he only played 6 games because he tore up his knee and missed the rest of the season. 1,600 yards passing, 14 touchdowns, and only 4 picks in 6 games. It's outstanding production, and that includes his 500-yard, 5-touchdown performance in Columbus against that Ohio State defense. The only reason he's third here is because he has to stay healthy. He's had an injury every year he's played that is just really limited what he can do on the field, and you have to stay healthy if you expect to beat Ohio State this year. And the problem for me is Indiana's offensive line is their weakness. So he has to find a way to get rid of the ball, get the ball out, get out of the pocket, and get out of harm's way. His big time throw rate was 3rd in the country last year, and his passing under pressure was 7th. Great in both of those areas, but his accuracy with only 56% completion percentage last year has to go up. And also his turnover worthy play rate is very high, and that also has to change. I'm excited for Penix. I think he has the potential to be the best quarterback in the Big Ten next year. But for me, he has to improve his accuracy and his turnovers. He just reminds me of Brett Favre, man. There's not a coverage too tight. There's not a number of defenders around the wide receiver that can deter him. He thinks he can make every throw, and I love the confidence. But let's just tone it back a little bit and make smart decisions. And if he does that, Michael Penix, his ceiling is higher than anybody else in the Big Ten at quarterback.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get that here. Your sleeper teams in the Big Ten.
See, this was hard because when you have a team like Ohio State that is dominated, like they have, everybody's a sleeper. Like if I told you any team beat Ohio State next year, you'd be shocked.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it hard. So I'm going to go with two teams. So I'm going to go with Indiana. And, we already covered what Michael Penix is, but they have to replace Jamar Johnson on the back end. They have to replace Walt Filer at wide receiver. Jermaine Johnson on the inside of that defensive line is a big piece that was missing. You have Michael Penix. Ty Freifogel was one of the most explosive wide receivers. He had 23 explosive plays last year. I mean, just an absolute deep threat. And his problem is he's not a middle of the field threat. He doesn't make plays within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage. He makes them all downfield, and that's just not going to work. Excuse me. But Tywan Mullen on the defense is going to be there. But their secondary, man, is so good. You got Reese Taylor and Jalen Williams and Devin Matthews on the back end of the defense combined with Mullen. They actually have the highest rated secondary in the Big Ten returning. But the problem is their line of scrimmage isn't there. They're going to need players like Matthew Bedford to step up. They got to transfer out of Auburn on the defensive line. They need to step up, and their rushing game has to help Penix out. There were times last year where they couldn't. If they got 50 rushing yards, it was a good weekend for Indiana. They have to be able to run the ball against elite teams, and that's what killed them against Ohio State. Is they couldn't run the ball, and then once they figured out Penix, they forced them into some bad plays, and that interception really cost them down the stretch. So Tom Allen's one of my favorite coaches in the country.
Yeah.
I love what he's doing. Charlton Warren is a new defensive coordinator. If he can't replicate what Kane Womack was doing on the defensive side of the ball, it's going to be a long year for Indiana. But if everything comes together, Penix plays better, Mullen and that defense works out, and the offensive defensive line could just be slightly above average, Indiana can absolutely make some waves in the Big Ten. And then Minnesota is an easy sleeper pick for me, man. You remember 2 years ago in 2019 when they were a top 10 team in the country and they spanked Auburn. I'm an Auburn fan. You see the jerseys in the back. They spanked us. And it was by far, I mean, we've been blown out by some teams, but to get beat like that by Minnesota was probably the most disheartening moment as an Auburn fan I've ever had. And we almost lost to Jacksonville State. So that tells you something. It was bad. But last year, man, it was weird because there was just one of these teams where when you looked at the roster on paper, they should have been beating everybody. And they just couldn't put it together. They had a lot of players opt out. Losing to Michigan week 1 like they did was just, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And the problem is their schedule's tough because week 1, they get Ohio State. September 2nd, it's Minnesota, Ohio State to open the season. And what a brutal game 1 if you're looking to bounce back. But when you look at it with the glass half full, CJ Stroud better be ready. You better be coming to play if you're going to play against a team like Minnesota. And then their non-conference games are pretty easy. And they also get Nebraska, which I think is a pretty good win for them. I don't think Nebraska's beaten anybody at all. And, they get Maryland. Northwestern's taking a big step back. Illinois is not going to beat anybody. Their last 3 games is where this season is going to be determined for Minnesota. They get Iowa, Indiana, and Wisconsin back to back to back the last 3 weeks of the season. No bye weeks. You got to play them back to back to back. They have to at least go 2-1 there if they expect to get to the championship game. They're going to have to win 2 of those, especially Wisconsin, because Wisconsin's probably competing with them for that division. Tanner Morgan has to be better than he was last year, man. He was one of the most dynamic quarterbacks in 2019, and last year just laid an egg. I don't know what happened to him, but they ranked top 5 in every positional category except defensive backs. So they should be in contention. Everything points for them to be in contention. Chris Bell at wide receiver is great. They got Boy Mayef at edge rusher. They have everything there. The problem is going to be, can they just can they be good enough on the back end of that defense to win any games? Mohamed Ibrahim is one of the top running backs in the country. For me, PJ Fleck needs this in terms of showing that last year was a fluke. Their defense is going to be the key. So we're going to see on Minnesota, but don't sleep on them as we get late into the season.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, indeed. So let's see. The $1 million question: who will win the Big Ten?
Oh man, listen, I went back and forth. So if you would have asked, I see, I saw that one. Mo was coming
Yeah.
for me. If you asked me a few months ago, I would not have said this team. But now looking at what they've brought in, I think Ohio State over Wisconsin is the pick here. I think Wisconsin slips through that other division. I think Ohio State pulls it out in a close one. When you look at what they have on the front seven, man, the offensive line might be the best offensive line we've seen in 10 years. They have 5 stars and they have tree trunks at every position. I mean, we're talking about grown men at every position. You have the best wide receiving unit in the country. It's Thayer Montford, Nicholas Piafree. All those guys are crazy. And their defensive line, man. Just let me run through some of these names. You got Jack Sawyer, the number one edge guy in the country coming out last year, who dominated the spring game. You still return Tyreek Smith, who had almost a 30% pass rush win rate last year. You still have Zach Harrison, who was a 5-star, and you still return Haskell Garrett at defensive tackle, who was one of the top run-stopping defensive tackles in the country last year. The front seven is going to be just ridiculous, Couch Coach. I mean, I don't know. Them and Clemson is going to be outrageous. You still have Garrett Wilson at wide receiver. You have Marvin Harrison Jr. You got Jackson Smith up in Jigba. You have Olave. You have Marvin Harrison Jr. I mean, what else do you want? And then on top of that, you look at the quarterback room. You have CJ Stroud, who's probably going to start. You have Quinn Ewers coming in just in case if he's ready late in the season. And you have all these guys, and Jack Miller, I believe it is a 5-star backup you have as well. You have 3 guys who would probably start anywhere in the country. Listen, there was a lot of questions on whether Ryan Day was winning with Urban Meyer talent or whether he was a good coach. He has out-recruited Urban Meyer every year he's been the head coach, and I honestly think we could be looking back saying, man, like, was that those Urban Meyer offenses early in his career, was it Ryan Day calling those plays? Because Ryan Day has outperformed right now what Urban Meyer is doing. Now, can they win the big question here is, can they win the college football playoff? I think that's going to be tough because of what Clemson has coming. And I think there's some sleepers, and I will get to those. But Oklahoma is a team that right now I think is better than Ohio State in terms of roster. I think Clemson's right there, and I don't want to spoil our SEC next week, but I think there's 2 teams in the SEC that are going to rival them. But for me, Ohio State wins this conference, and I just think right now in the Big Ten, until these other teams pick up their recruiting, it's going to be Ohio State and everybody else.
Yeah, most definitely, especially in the Big Ten. Yeah, absolutely.
Man, he's calling you out. Hey, hopefully UNC finds us.
Hopefully
UNC finds their way to the playoffs so we can have this debate.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, we're getting there. We're football schools. So, I mean, we're basketball schools. So
for Ohio State don't want to see UNC on the court.
Nah. But yeah, we're starting to get there. Well, I think we get ready to build something very special down in Chapel Hill. So yeah, we're definitely a team on the rise. But yeah, man. So this wraps up our Big Ten preview. So next week we'll be talking to SEC. And that's gonna be interesting. And we know that's your wheelhouse. You're an Auburn guy, as you can tell. These last 4 weeks, he got a Cadillac behind him. And Carnell Williams, so
Listen, I'm sorry, guys, if you're an Auburn fan tuned in, because I write for Fly War Eagle too. If you're an Auburn fan watching by chance, it's not going to be much Auburn talk next week because there's not much to talk about. There's one guy I want to talk about, but everything else is probably not going to be talked about very much. Just a spoiler.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, so all right, so let's put a bow on this week's Big Ten preview. So, Zach, you and Brandon got a big show tonight.
Oh man, yeah. Listen, I mean, I know we're doing Power 5 previews now. We also cover FCS on our channel. So tonight, 7 p.m. Central, live on our Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, and the Off the Ball Network Facebook. We're doing our SWAC preview, 2021 SWAC preview. It's always crazy when you talk about the SWAC, man. So if you're into that, if you want to get some information, definitely tune into that because it's going to be crazy. We're talking Dion, talking to Alabama A&M and Akil Glass, talking all of them, man. So make sure to tune into that.
Yes, and I'm telling you, and this is, obviously we talk after the shows. I never knew how SWAC football will get people in an uproar. Like, I am here for this, and I'm definitely going to look forward to it. And like you said, if you go on a Blue Bloods YouTube page and they SWAC,
it's up there.
They're coming. Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, they listen and don't. Hey, listen. Never think you just talking to the ether because they listening and they'll let you know they're listening.
Correct. Yes. You guys definitely know, and so now you're a part of us. So if they want to gang up on you, you got a whole set of brothers that's gonna ride with you as well. We're gonna ride with our South Alabama boys.
Absolutely, man. It's a blast, and definitely got to tune into SWAC football this year, man. It's gonna be. I'm telling you, I don't know how many people tuned in watch FCS football, but it's gonna be a year or two, man. There's some ballers down there, and there's definitely a lot of storylines and interest generating down there. Yes, indeed.
So once again, I definitely appreciate you, Zach, for coming on this week for the Big Ten. Man. We'll close out the Power 5 next week. I tell you, these 4 weeks have went by really, really fast. Like,
I love it though. The quicker we get to some football, the better for me.
Yes. So we pretty much have you up until week 0 of college football. Yep. So we got you until week 0, pretty much.
Oh man. I'm so pumped, man. Week 1 can't come quick enough. I've been watching old games from like last year and a few years ago just to get ready. I'm just like fiending for some football at this point.
I feel you. I know, and we're here. We're right here. We're right at the doorstep. So, yes, indeed. So once again, appreciate you, Zach, for coming on for this week's Big Ten. Same time next week, we're gonna close out our Power 5 preview with the SEC. I guess we saved the best for the last potentially. I guess we say that.
Yeah, we can say that. Hey, until someone beats them, I guess they gotta be the best.
You're right. Correct. So that means the other conferences, y'all gotta beat the man. But yeah. So yes, once again, we're here and this is it. We're out. So this has been this week's Power 5 Big Ten preview. We'll catch you guys next week with the SEC.